This week, hey, look, it's me again on another show I don't normally primary host. Matt's off moving or some kind of life event like that. But on this episode, we welcome John Ramsey, the Chief Information Security Officer at National Student Clearinghouse, to discuss security in education. In the leadership and communication articles, in-depth protection is a matter of basic hygiene, 4 strategies to find time for yourself, enterprises muddled over cloud security responsibilities, and screw productivity hacks. My morning routine is to get up late. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Do you know what the biggest cyber risk is for your organization? It's the browser, and your users are in it all the time. Every time a link is clicked, untrusted web code enters your network and runs on your machine, exposing you to risk. What if users had full access to the web but never touched web code? You'd have all the benefit of the web and none of the risk. That's why Authenticate built Silo. It's a browser built in the cloud that runs all web content in a remote, isolated browser that never touches your network or device. With a simple click, your organization is fully protected from all web exploits. Find out more at securityweekly.com/authenticate. That's authentic number 8. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM. Let the team at Black Hills Information Security test your defenses. With over 10 years of experience in penetration testing, red teaming, and threat hunting, the testers at Black Hills will help you find the holes in your security before the bad guys do. The team at Black Hills cares about educating and sharing their knowledge by creating countless blogs, open source tools, and webcasts for you to learn more about the tradecraft of pen testing and red teaming. Visit securityweekly.com/BHIS to join their mailing list and view the latest blogs and webcasts from Black Hills Information Security.
Well, welcome everyone to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 155, recorded on December 9th, 2019, here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, joined by my co-host, Jason Albuquerque, who's here with me in studio.
Hey, it's great to be back.
Yes.
I missed you.
I missed you too. You set your chair higher. I think this chair is slowly sinking. Do you notice this? Am I just slowly, like, it looks like I'm going down on an elevator.
Don't they say you shrink when you get older? Isn't that what happens?
You did that purposely, didn't you?
I did not. I just sat down.
Late night talk show hosts used to play games like that. I see how it is.
Always at a posture of dominance. It's the military in me.
Oh, boy. Join us at InfoSec World 2020, March 30th through April 1st. At the Disney Contemporary Resort. Security Weekly listeners save 15% off the InfoSec World Main Conference or World Pass by going to securityweekly.com/ISW 2020. It's going to be good times. Lots of fun there. Mark your calendars for the Security Weekly Holiday Extravaganza on December 19th. That's right. We'll have
forward to that.
5 one-hour panels, one 1.5-hour panel, a holiday hack challenge, a partridge, and a security tree of some kind or something along those lines. securityweekly.com/live. You can check it out. Jason, which of the panels are you coming on? I couldn't find it. Something's crashing
in the
background. I think they're trying to swap my chair out because I'm sinking.
Oh.
Yeah. So which of the roundtables?
Oh, God, I'm on a couple of them.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm coming in at about 2:30ish.
Gotcha.
And then from there on, I'm game.
Okay. You're going to stay late, right? Because that hacker culture is going to be the last one.
I believe we're going to at least 10-ish.
Yeah, 10-ish, yes.
10-ish.
We'll see where it takes us.
Yes.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
I'm warming up my Uber app now.
Yes, you should. I'm excited about the security history one. That one's
yes.
going to be a lengthy
Yes.
one, I think. Probably be our longest panel.
Yeah.
But lots of fun stuff. And
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
one I wanted to do a lot of research for.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
with the other ones, I've got panels of expert. I mean, this one I do too. But when you have such a broad topic like security history,
Oh, big time.
yeah, I wanted to. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun.
And some of us old goats actually remember some of those days.
There's a lot of old goats. No, I didn't mean to offend anyone, but folks that are vintage, right, and very wise, older
Yes,
and wise
like a
is what I
wine.
meant to say. That's right. John Ramsey is here with us today. He is the Chief Information Security Officer at the National Student Clearinghouse. And has a rich history, actually held several positions, including CISO for the U.S. House of Representatives. He was also selected as one of the top 100 CISOs globally for 2017, and only one of 2 government CISOs selected. John, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Nice to have you. So, John, how did you get your start in information security?
I've been working security now for about 30 years. I started off as an intelligence and security analyst in the Army. And as we're speaking vintage, as you were mentioning comments earlier, so I was over in Europe during the Cold War when the wall was still up. So some of the first threat actors I studied from their physical perspective is the Russians and then the Iranians. And then when cyber started to take hold in the early 90s, before it was officially a discipline in the 2000s, it was a natural evolution to move from physical security into that logical space as the computer started evolving more and more into every perspective of business there was. Once I did that, the Federal Information Security Management Act of 2002 came out, and then all the federal agencies took off on having some sort of security program. The State Department brought me on board. I helped build out a few of their programs through the 2000s. At that time, the Russians and the Chinese and a lot of other nation-state actors started taking hold in the early 2010s on a lot of attacks. And that's when the Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board that brought me on board to be their CISO. And for those not familiar with the Federal Retirement Board, they oversee the federal government's retirement system, which is about $480 billion for every federal employee that ever was or currently is or anybody drawing any type of pension. And then I've just continued to go from place to place with that. There's always a cyber need.
So explain for us, John, what the National Student Clearinghouse is. It sounds like a clearinghouse like I used to see on TV when I was a kid or something like that, but I imagine it's something very different than what I'm imagining.
So the clearinghouse, it's a great mission here. We really act almost as a brokerage firm for all the education industry, for 98% of the colleges and universities in the United States. They have requirements to report to the Department of Education on their enrollment reporting, if people are drawing student loans, if they're in deferment, if they're in forbearance. So as a result, we have a scalable IT solution that we provide at almost no cost to the education industry, and we save them about $700 to $800 million a year. Consequently, we have information on about 150 million unique learners. So if you've ever been to school or have a degree, we're probably securing your PII data of some sort or fashion, and we report that to the Department of Education. And we also provide verification services to other industries. If somebody's trying to validate that you actually have a degree, a lot of these commercial customers offset the costs that we're able to provide this for free or at cost for the education in the schools.
Wow,
we also service about 11,000 K through 12 schools. In addition, so schools are able to track, we graduate a student from here. Do they go on? Do they graduate college? What do we need to change in our curriculum to try to make the students more successful as they move throughout their careers? And then we're learning that we have students of all ages. It's not just the traditional high school student. It could be anybody, whether it's right out of high school, going back to school, in their 30s and their 60s.
So you have a lot of sensitive data. I mean, I remember working for a university and working very hard to make sure we protect the students' PII, essentially, right? Because they have to disclose a lot of that to enroll in the school. But you're collecting that up for every college and almost every college and university in the country.
And K through 12, right? I mean, you have the university experience.
Yeah.
I grew up in the local government K through 12 realm, right? So just knowing some of the cultures that are out there in education today, that makes security a big chore.
Yeah.
It does, and we provide this service. It's easy for us to do and demand the highest levels of security at the organization, and we do. But we also have to tailor this to the fashion that security isn't equivalent everywhere. Some schools can afford more security than others. So when we provide secure solutions to receive their information, we have to take into account that we're dealing with every level of security that's out there as they process and transmit that to us.
That's some unique challenges to your job. What's some of the most challenging things you have to do to protect all that data?
There's a lot of challenges. The first thing is security is not equal everywhere. It's always hard to know where is the gaps in my security posture. And as the security market is just continually growing, every vendor out there will tell you, you need our tool. You've got to use us. If you want to stop the bad guy, invest money with us and we'll show you how to do it. So it's really figuring out when is enough security enough. I don't want to overburden it so the schools can't transmit their information. I don't want to overburden the security posture that our staff and employees can't do their jobs on a daily basis. They've got to be able to receive files. They've got to be able to receive emails. I can quote every security statistic out there for almost every breach and indicate why we need to do this, but I've got to find that fine line that, we're safe enough, but you can still do your business and we're not trying to kill you from what you're doing. Trying to really minimize cyber fatigue, I guess, is the new phrase that's being thrown out there. Users should be able to do what they need to do, and the security is happening in the background.
Right. Is there a concern, like when you do threat models, I would imagine the integrity of the data is likely equally as important as the privacy of the data.
Oh, absolutely. With all the information that we have, if somebody went in and changed all of the 1s to 5s, we just changed the entire education workforce, right, and what their transcripts would reflect, all with a single command, which is horrible. And it's funny that you mentioned about the threat model. So that's one of the other challenges that we have. There's so many different audits that are out there, whether from the financial institutions, from the federal agencies, from the schools, and everybody wants you to meet these compliant frameworks. Meanwhile, the compliant frameworks doesn't necessarily model the threat vectors. So we started doing something a little bit different. So we use our first priority now. We model after MITRE's attack methodology, where they're looking at the various breaches of the malicious actors over the last 5 to 10 years and all the different techniques and tactics that they use. And we're trying to make sure that we can actually compensate for those most widely used tactics so we can stop the bad guy first. And while we stop the bad guy, we'll naturally meet a lot of the compliance requirements that are there. The fact that somebody does security awareness training on an annual basis is important, but I want to spend more of a focus on stopping the phishing attacks that are 95% prevalent into organizations first, and then I'll hit the security awareness second. So it's a little bit different mentality on how you approach it, but we're really trying to implement countermeasures first and compliance second.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting approach as we try always to define what security basics means, and I try and recommend standards for people to go off of. What you're saying, John, is look at something like the attack matrix from MITRE and focus on just stopping real-world attacks, not so much trying to define what security basics really mean and how we meet maybe those somewhat fictitious requirements of security hygiene or security basics.
Yeah, and I'm not saying one is more important than the others. I'm just saying you can't do everything at once. So we prioritize that off those threat vectors first, and then we hit the compliance pieces second. There's some basic hygiene that it's almost a given you have to do. So I'm not quite sure the benefit of auditing every year that, does somebody have the password complexity requirement that's in place that they meet 3 of the 4 standards, the uppercase, lowercase, a special character, and a number. I think that's a given. We'd all be out of the jobs if we didn't do that basic step right there alone. And then the National Institute of Standards and Technology comes out 10 years later saying, you know what, we really shouldn't have expirations with the passwords. So that kind of counters the whole audit and compliance mechanism that's been in place for 15 years.
Yeah, right.
So, but if you looked at it from a threat perspective, that regardless of the expiration date, that we set multi-factor, something as simple as that, along with every password that was out there, we've stopped the bad guy regardless of what the compliance mechanism was that's in place.
Yeah, and I mean, we've talked about this on the show before, right? Compliance should be a byproduct of strong security. At the end of the day, it sounds like that's the framework and the philosophy that you have, right? You're using a security-based framework to ensure that you have compliance in the end.
Yeah, you can't do everything. Even the staffs that have hundreds of people. I mean, you look at a lot of the larger breaches of some of the financial institutions or the federal government. They've got security teams that are in the hundreds, and they can meet the compliance requirements. In fact, a lot of them have challenges meeting the compliance requirements. But meanwhile, you can only do so much. What do you focus on first? And nobody has an unlimited budget, and the security market just gets more and more expensive, regardless of the tool. And then trying to figure out what is that tool that's high value, low cost, high impact as far as the benefit. There's a whole cyclic of events that have to happen to get that right security posture in place. And trying to tackle everything at once is just almost a fool's errand.
So, John, process and technology combined together, what are some of your recommendations on areas that you should focus on when you say, look at your security posture versus the attack matrix? Like, we've got all these different categories of security, all these different compliance things, all these different things that we want to do, from in network protection to endpoint security. But like, what's been some of the more valuable things in checking off those things on the MITRE attack framework to go, yeah, we can detect that or prevent that now?
Yeah, so that endpoint detection and response, I mean, antivirus has evolved over the last 15 years. I think everybody agrees that the signature-based approach is, I don't want to say ineffective, but it's nowhere near like it should be or what it was. So having something that can automatically detect something and respond and contain it on a box until it's investigated, I think that's key, because all the malicious actors, their first thing is once they get a beachhead and they come into an organization, they want to move laterally. If they can't move laterally, they're stopped. We assess a lot of our infrastructure off the Lockheed Martin's kill chain. If you're breaking into a bank, there's a good chance the nation states are going to break into the bank. You're not going to stop them. But if that vault door can close behind them and they can't get back out and exfiltrate the data, to me, that would be a win. Put in the right mechanisms in place that gets you that biggest bang for the buck. So those EDR solutions that will do the automated investigations and almost immediate containment, critical. Basic hygiene, such as the intrusion detections and IPSs on the network, critical. When I was at the House of Representatives, I think we averaged probably 200 to 300 million penetration attempts on a monthly basis. We did the math, that's 200 to 300 every second. We're being pounded on for people trying to get in. There's just some basic stuff you have to have in place, but taking it to that next level, EDR, the anti-phishing tools. You can train all your staff all you want. Somebody will inevitably click. It's human nature. And with mobile devices, people are going to click on a link, a phishing email on a phone, because they can't hover over it anymore that they've been trained for the last 5 years. Right. They're not going to realize they're clicking on a phishing link, especially on a mobile device. But if you got the right technologies that's doing the sandboxing and checking those phishing links once they're clicked, you're taking a lot of that catalyst from the end users. And they're not that expensive, so you get a really big bang for the buck as far as keeping your people safe. What shouldn't happen, your staff shouldn't have to worry about every single security awareness training video that they've had in order to implement security and make sure that they're not the weakest link. It's almost insulting when we say that they're the weakest link. They're doing their jobs. It's our job as security professionals really to have the right mechanisms in place so they can do that.
And I'm sure process plays into it as well, right, when you're handling that sensitive data. And a lot of the things that I've seen to combat phishing attempts and stop phishing attempts is not exactly what you're saying, John, right? It's not the fact that users went to training. It's I have technology, and we've got a solid process to make sure that we're not going to have some kind of huge breach. And that's often what stops the attacker. Not in all cases, unfortunately, but process is important, right?
Oh, yeah. Security is more than the technology. It's really interesting. Your vendors and cybersecurity tools that are evolving and getting more mature are actually incorporating playbooks. They're already drafting those processes for those SOC analysts. Throw another process on a SOC analyst as they're looking and monitoring 2 to 3 billion events a month and trying to weed all that out to get the needle in the haystack, versus having something that has a process, that has a playbook that's generated for that specific tool. More importantly, automates the majority of the playbook, so all they have to do is look at the final result. Yeah, it's a lot of these breaches have happened. The tools have detected everything. It's the people looking at the events afterwards didn't take the right action, or they didn't take consistent actions that just didn't stop something from happening. Yeah. Something as simple as, we know that this is the bloodhound.exe is a malicious executable that's associated with breaches. We should automatically just contain that until we figure out what it is. Versus, we have an alert and we get to the alert 12 hours later. Although we've met our service level response time for looking at an alert, 12 hours later is too long. So having those processes and automating those processes as much as possible is really critical with the evolution of technology and the malicious activity, as well as the cyber pros that are out there.
Jason?
Yeah, no, I look at student information as a high value target these days, right? We're seeing all of these K through 12 universities getting breached. They're pulling data out of their student information systems, using them for phishing attacks, using them for the equivalent of business email compromise, right? Where they're targeting the provosts of schools, the chairman of their board, and really trying to
firsthand.
Yeah, right. Using it
20
for
years
extortion.
ago, right? Yeah.
I've read some instances of they're leveraging the information to actually do some physical violence, right? So threatening students to try to get some level of extortion out of the threat. I'm interested in, are you doing data integrations with these organizations, right? How are you actually pulling the data into the clearinghouse? Not from a technical perspective, right? But, I would almost imagine that you have to be at even higher levels of security posture, because, you're taking that information that traditionally lives in student information systems and bringing that up to a clearinghouse.
Right. I'm sure they're not sending you a Word document with a macro, right?
Well, it's funny. So the technology at the schools vary.
Yeah.
To touch on your comment about the different types of data that's out there. So we only deal with the student PII, but when you look at the education industry as a whole, so you've got medical universities that have HIPAA. Mm-hmm. You've got PII. You've got research universities. You've got intellectual property.
Yep.
You've got almost every sensitive data type is out there is across the education industry that has various levels of security implemented across the different schools. So the education industry just has a giant target on the middle of its back anyways, and a lot of people are doing a lot of great things. EDUCAUSE is an institution out there that tries to deploy common security standards. We've got our own information sharing analysis center that run ISAC, which tries to fuse in all that cyber threat intel and cost affordable mechanisms. And then you've got us. We try to partner with the two to get the word out as well on the different business units. How do you secure your data at the schools? How can a registrar and enrollment officer, what they can do and what they should be cognizant of? And then receiving all of that information, like you mentioned, it is gross volumes that we receive. And this is where we've really taken heart to the zero trust principles from Forrester. Outside of our organization, we trust nobody. I don't think we can afford to trust anybody. So we make everything that comes in get scanned or checked of some sort. And then internal to our organization, we have various levels of trust where by the time that it hits our databases, that it's gone through the most rigorous checks you can imagine that it's coming from who it should be coming from. And that's the only way we can do business. We can't have one-offs. We can't have 1,000 different configurations depending on the schools. It's really based off the levels of access and trust and, to make sure that we keep all that data safe.
No, that's actually great. And, I look at it this way, right? In education, whether it's K through 12 or higher ed, they're innately in a culture of open network, right? They want everything to be open, everything to be transparent. They want everything to be shared. And it's great to have an organization who is a partner to those organizations, right, to those universities in K through 12. And it sounds like you share best practices downstream. So maybe, I look at this as a beautiful thing that you're influencing them to be more secure. Right, and to kind of thin out that open network mentality and get them to be a little bit more conservative when it comes to that.
Well, there's a lot of best practices, and there's a lot of experience across all of these organizations. And at that point in time, it's now no longer a security challenge, but how do you communicate a market to get the word out to all the right people? Yeah. And we're smart enough to know that doing it by ourselves is probably not the right answer. But we partnered with EDUCAUSE, we partnered with the REN ISAC. We did our first white paper a year ago. Basically, again, it goes back to registrars. What should you know? What should you do? And it's really 10 basic steps. That if your data gets breached at the school, there's a good chance this is your data. Are you involved? Do you know how your machines are patched? Do you know how you can help your security team at the school? What happens if you need an incident response? Are you able to notify your students? Really common questions that really get overlooked quite often. So again, we're trying to provide some of that thought leadership going back to the schools, but we want to partner with all the right people to do that. We want to share. We're all on one team. We're all trying to do the best to stop the bad guys and keep everything safe.
Yeah. This day and age, it takes a community, right? It really does.
It does. And it's interesting. So the interface from the school's perspective is the registrar's office in most cases, I would imagine, right?
They are the business unit.
Yeah. And so do you have campaigns specifically like for the schools for that business unit, or like how specific do you get with your kind of awareness campaigns and sharing of information?
No, that's actually a really good question. So EDUCAUSE typically hits the IT departments.
Yeah.
REN ISAC typically hits the security departments. Mm-hmm. So nobody was really hitting the business units, the data owners themselves. And that's who we interact with on a daily basis across, I want to say it's 3,800 universities, give or take. Mm-hmm. That's really close. So we actually made our campaign directed to who our first-line customers are that are the same customers of those schools' IT as well as those schools' security, what they can do to help them. And it's really interesting perspective. There's the ACRO Association, the American Conference of Registrar Officers and Enrollment Officers, met last year, and we did a presentation for them. And we had a combination of an ACRO executive director, the CISO for California State University, myself, and we sat on a panel, and we just kind of asked and discussed, if your data within the registrar's office is compromised, what do you do? And every type of question and answer you can imagine came out where an hour went by with the blink of an eye, and some of them have files that are stored, hard copies that they can't get rid of, or they want to make it all into digital copies, but they don't have the funding. But it really brought light to it's more than just an IT department saying, hey, you need to do this, versus what they can proactively do to reduce themselves as being a target at the schools.
Right. Does FERPA help with protecting some of this data in the registrar's office?
FERPA allows a lot of the requirements and justification for why they need to secure the information. Right. I don't think FERPA is strongly written like FSMA is from a cybersecurity perspective, but FERPA is a very strong piece of legislation that indicates that those families and students and their rights to privacy shall not be violated. So it gives the registrars a lot of opportunities to make sure that whoever their third-party service provider is in any capacity, to include the clearinghouse, that we're meeting all of those FERPA requirements. It's one of the things that I don't want to say it forced us to. We willingly did this, but years ago we made sure that we had the privacy badges in place, that I Keep Data Safe badges in place. We want to make sure that when we get their data that we're instilling every level of confidence we can, that we're keeping their stuff safe and secure.
Yeah, and I briefly went on the website earlier and just kind of looked at your mission statement, which has trust in data as part of the core mission, which is awesome. Right. And then you have an entire privacy page, right, which talks about your commitment to FERPA, your commitment to the Student Privacy Pledge, even all the way down to leveraging trusted services principles. Right, I think that's great that you're taking that SOC 2 Type 2 mentality and saying, hey, listen, we're gonna butt our operations up against this, so we're a trusted operation, that we're putting your privacy first.
Yeah, and the SOC 2 Type 2 was definitely our best initiative that we've done yet. We did the SOC 2 Type 1 on one line of business, and it's like, well, we're secure enough. We know we're secure enough. We're confident with that. We did a SOC 2 Type 2 across both of our lines of business, just to make sure that there's no questions, whether you're a financial institution, whether you're an educational institution. Data is data. We're going to keep it all secure, but more importantly, we're investing time, money, and resources just to make sure that we're we're doing the people, processes, and technology to support the cyber posture as we should.
Right. No, that's great. Yeah, it just shows that you're taking a holistic approach, right? Because you have all of these different, checks and balances in place to ensure that you're putting trust and data integrity and privacy first.
Yeah. Fantastic. More questions for John? John, thank you so much for appearing on Business Security Weekly.
Hey, thank you again for the invitation. Y'all have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
Nice to meet you, John.
And with that, we'll take a short break, come back with the business security news. Stay tuned.